I'm delighted to present another sustainable story. This is an ITIC spotlight on Irish sustainable tourism businesses, which is being produced in association with AIB. ITIC, as you know, is the Irish Tourism Industry Confederation, representing 20,000 tourism businesses all around the country. Our recently launched Sustainable Tourism Report is available on our website, itic.ie. And in this series of interviews, I will be speaking with leaders in the tourism sector who have made exceptional steps towards achieving climate action goals, and to hear their stories of how they're managing their businesses responsibly and sustainably. And today I'm going to speak to a friend and neighbour, actually, Shane O'Doherty, who's the owner of Shane's Howth Adventures. Shane, it's a pleasure to speak to you here today.
Hi, Catherine. Good morning.
Lovely to have you. Shane, I'd love if you would tell everybody a little bit about your business, how you set it up, sharing the great outdoors with Howth's visitors, and what your own background was that led you to your adventure company.
Okay. Well, I had maybe 30 years in the aviation industry, zipping around here, there, and everywhere, maybe like up to 6 flights a week, hotels, and a carbon personal footprint of about 50 tons. And I was also always a great lover of the great outdoors. I'm much happier outside, and I cherish it. And I cherish my own community. And I learned as I traveled that actually it was more precious than I recognized when I was young. So when my youngest child decided he wasn't going to go to college, I kind of said, okay, well, I'm not going to go to work. So I closed down the old consultancy business and sat back and decided that I would spend the rest of my days minding this community kind of to the best of my ability, both in terms of the wilderness and the habitats and the biodiversity, and then trying to bring attention to that value to all the businesses in the community in the expectation that maybe we'd all mind it together.
Okay. So a lifestyle choice and a career choice. And I think you still have a family connections within the business, isn't that right?
Yeah, actually, you mean in this business?
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, it's becoming a little bit of a family business. And my wife and my son, who has since gone on to study tourism at TUD, and like actually nephews and nieces. And again, it's a community thing. So it's not just family. We do have considerable involvement in the community, and actually it is something that appears to be of tremendous value to our customers, is this kind of sense of community and familiarity. And yeah, it seems to be more important maybe than we anticipated.
I think authenticity is something that people often speak about as being like core to the experience that makes something really memorable and brings away those unique legacy memories. So I think if people feel they have a sense that they're engaging with someone who really is of the place that they're in, it makes for a very lasting impression. Just speaking about where you are, Howth is a somewhat unique destination. I know that it's a special amenity area. It's got a special designation, and it's also at the northern tip of the Dublin Bay biosphere. Could you just tell us a little bit about that and about the unique hinterland?
Okay, well, you know, we're on the northern tip of Dublin Bay, and it's quite elevated, and it has a very ancient geology, and it has more habitats in a confined space than you can imagine. From the marine side, the coast itself, the intertidal zone, the cliffs, the beaches, the grassland, the woodland. We even have an eccentric Siamese rainforest, and then we have the heathland. And so this was recognized a long time ago when the SAAO went into place, Special Area Amenity Order, and it was realized that this needed to be protected for Dublin and for Ireland and for future generations. And then also the UNESCO Dublin Bay Biosphere has slowly expanded from what was originally Dollymount to cover the area between Dalkey Island and Ireland's Eye. And these are slow initiatives, but they've actually even had tremendous impact in my lifetime. And when I was a child, Dublin Bay was something of a toxic pond with very little biodiversity. And now we have, 130 seals on Ireland's Eye. We have a gannet colony on Ireland's Eye that didn't come here till the 80s. And so right across the whole place, from I think the phytoplankton in the water to the seals and the dolphins and the whales that are even passing up and down the East Coast, the biodiversity, the trophic cascades are expanding exponentially, if that ain't too much to say.
And I think it surprises people, like perhaps there's a greater education and awareness piece of work to be done around Dublin as a capital city to have this very rich resource within the neighbourhood, you know, just within 30 minutes of the city. I know, in fact, just taking place in recent days was the Citizens' Assembly in Malahide. And one of the interesting things that they did was bring the citizens out on field trips. And I think Bull Island was one of the places that they visited. So I think there's probably a big education and awareness piece to be done with the people who actually live here to appreciate what is available on our doorsteps. Like when you were looking at the business in the first instance, okay, you were seeking a career choice that suited a different lifestyle. You didn't want to be in the aviation game, you know, up in the air so many hours per week. I mean, was the environment central to the type of business that you wanted to create, or was it just sort of a happy marriage of all of your interests coming together?
No, the environment was kind of the purpose of the thing. And like, I've traveled a lot, but I've lived here all my life. And I've been very close in my life to all of the habitats I mentioned. And I've always kind of cherished them and almost felt that like that was part of the community. And so in order to protect it or to bring people's attention to it, we had to share it. And so to share it, we have to understand it better. And in fact, people get a little bit astounded or astonished when they understand what we have here. And the best way to do it is to do it on foot and to actually get into it seasonally, day by day, you know, in terms of even the meteorology. And we want to do it on the land and on the sea. And then underlying that, actually, there's a history of Ireland written over the last 10,000 years in this same peninsula. So if you kind of do it carefully, almost like slightly interpretively, you can walk people through the last 10,000 years of human presence here up to their own present moment. And they go away looking at Dublin and Dublin Bay and Howth and all the way we can see up to the mountains of Mourne, up to Slieve of Donard, like Lamb Bay, Ireland's Eye. You see it in a different way and you feel maybe more part of it. And then for the local businesses, they see that, you know, rather than building an extra house and having one more family in the neighborhood, that actually the tourists and the corporate people who come all cherish it and are prepared to pay to be part of it. So the local shops, restaurants, bars, whatever they are, they all benefit from what was previously just wild heathland or wild coastland or maybe slightly dodgy cliffs. And so it all gets a value that everybody begins to start to protect it.
Okay. And I know that, I mean, as you say, when you bring people out on walking groups, you know, I mean, I know you tell them in advance appropriate footwear and that, but you're able to show them things that they wouldn't discover on their own, you know, that may not be on maps, but you're able to narrate the stories. But you also, you added a fleet of e-bikes over the last couple of years. And I presume that brings more accessibility to people as well. And well, I suppose it might reduce the step count on a daily basis. How's that experience been for people?
Well, you know, if you check the reviews, we're surprised. And actually, it's booked out all the time. And, you know, maybe the hiking is not for absolutely everybody. And actually, the e-biking is not for absolutely everybody either, because you've got to be able to cycle a bike properly. But the e-biking seems to be a slightly more lighthearted and swifter way to go through the same basic environmental and cultural story, sitting in the saddle of an e-bike, which does the work. And if you know this space, Catherine, there's plenty of steep hills about. And we have a particularly kind of appropriate e-bike that you can step through to get on and off, and that actually will take the sting out of the hills. Okay. So the e-bike seems to be a little bit lighter hearted and a little bit swifter. And like people have the best day of their stay in Ireland, or sometimes you get the best day of their lives.
Yeah. And where do the visitors come from?
Well, before the pandemic, it was international tourism, and it was like the small family groups, the individuals, and they came from everywhere. Of course, a lot of English-speaking countries, but Germans, Scandinavians, South Americans, Australians. I always found that when you got Singaporeans or Koreans, that actually you almost got a look back through the mirror at a different world when you saw how they reacted to what we take for granted here. So basically everywhere.
And then, like, during the pandemic, obviously all of the international visitor flow was stemmed at base. And I mean, did you just scale back, or did you focus on the domestic market, or what was the reaction to that? How did you respond?
We decided that, we were just going to keep going. So we didn't have much going on. The e-bikes were mothballed. I kind of kept going, and I'd be doing it on my own with the dog, or with whomever I could drag out, even just to keep the social media going.
Yeah.
To keep our own sense of the place, to have a feel for it, to stay kind of like match fit. And even in the 5 kilometer lockdown, it's not a bad place to have been. You can discover new stories, but also we got all the locals out, and it's always been a thing. One part of the mission or whatever, locals, that you share it with your own local community.
Well, it's interesting what you say. Of course, you're absolutely right that, keeping the social media alive and building your content and keeping yourself top of mind with people is so important, that even it built up that pent up demand where people were craving, when I get to travel again, this is something that I want to do. So you were creating something that was at that point perhaps aspirational, but just, very beautiful content for people to look longingly at when they weren't able to get there themselves. It's interesting as well that you talk about, the work that you did locally in the community. So in a way, you're sort of building up a little sort of ambassador army.
Yeah, absolutely.
For people who come to the locality, and that's very important. Like, as an entrepreneur, when you were setting up, I'm sure you had engagement with different agencies, different local stakeholders. Do you want to speak about that a little bit in terms of how, while you'd worked in aviation, you hadn't built a tourism business before, like specific to, engaging directly B2C. Who did you speak to, and who helped you along the way of the journey?
I tapped into Fáilte, and actually Fáilte are very, very, very expert, and they're very patient, and they're quite supportive. And Fingal Tourism were also quite supportive and helpful, and the odd time would give me kind of like, they'd save the show here and there with the little steers that I got. And then Howth Tourism were good, and like the local community then becomes kind of supportive, and ITIC and the DMOs, and you start to find this industry. And what I discovered was that actually the airline model works perfectly well with it. I had also liked the ski school model, and I thought that we're like the lifts, and if we can bring the consumers to the bars, restaurants, shops, whatever, they will value it and reciprocate. And slowly found that the ski school model, the airline model, the season is the same. You have a departure, you have arrival. And slowly but surely I learned a little bit how the whole thing fits together. And then, of course, either through success or failure as you move along, you learn what works or not. I mean, the community is very important. The back office, the back office is kind of a big deal, that you make it as easy as possible and allows you to get on with the main event.
Okay. And then I know that you've been involved with the ITIC with Brendan and other members who are in the activity and adventure. Is there a kinship there with others like you around the country who have set up, small businesses and taken them to new heights in the last couple of years?
Yeah, but we all are in it because we do love the outside, and we do believe that it's something we need to cherish and something we need to share. So within that, there is this kind of like, I think we're kind of a pioneering community, but like we also have a kind of like an ideal of what we want to do and what we want to share. And that gives us all the motivation to keep going.
Very good. And what's next for you, do you think? Have you any interesting projects around the corner? Or are you at a rebuild stage now and trying to galvanize all the hard work that you've done over the last number of years?
Well, the missing link for us in Howth, for me in Howth, for our original vision was always how to get on the water. So like Howth is a virtual island, and tried a lot of different ways to crack that. I've spent my life on the water myself in a kind of recreational amateur capacity, and so now I'm involved with Ken Doyle in Ireland's Eye Ferries, and we're working up the Ireland's Eye Ferries tour, trip, or voyage to extend the reach or the accessibility, particularly around Ireland's Eye, which is an astonishing wildlife habitat on the cliffs, puffins, guillemots. I mean, it astonishes me every day. So that's probably the next thing.
Well, it sounds like you model in your business so many different elements of sustainability, like not just the environmental protection, but the social side of it as well, the community, the legacy, the cultural stories and everything that to do with where you're based. So it's been lovely talking to you today. Wish you every success for a great season and many more to come. I hope it's a long and dry season for you as well. And I hope that everybody who shows up to rent an e-bike from you actually knows how to ride an e-bike.
Yes,
before they arrive.
So do we.
And we look forward to your adventures on the sea. Maybe we catch up about them another time.
Great.
Lovely.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you.
Great to talk to you. Take care. Bye-bye.